website in which the configuration has been changed in the top part of the ship. And I discovered that no one had noticed that for like 20 years, and I actually did a measurement, and I saw it was really, this is a different dimension. How'd they do that? Well, if that object is hovering in front of a tree, and it's a garbage can lid, and it's 300 feet away, it's not going to look that big. And how do you when you have to weld onto an object, you don't weld onto plastic, so then who made a metal garbage can lid? It raises question upon question, and believe it or not, I think it's an intrinsic part of this case, because it's going to get people to look.
To make people ask questions,
yes,
and to pursue them. Michael, stick around. We're going to take another break. We'll be right back with more of Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking with Michael Horn about the Billy Meier case, the infamous Billy Meier case, with its photos that some say are too good to be true. I'll tell you, I've always had an open mind about this myself, and have sort of thought that the earliest photos, the first ones that I saw, were just incredible, so clear and in daylight and seemingly hard to fake. And then there's some of the photos that seem to come later that look kind of hokey. In particular, there's something called the wedding cake beam ship that I always thought looked kind of phony, just to my untrained eye. When we come back after this brief break, we're going to ask Michael Horn about those wedding cake photos, also looking at some of the other kinds of evidence that have been raised and questioned in the Meier case, a piece of metal, sound recordings, and, of course, those prophecies that we mentioned a while ago. Stay right with us. We'll be right back on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. We're speaking with Michael Horn about the Billy Meier case. Michael, you heard my little tease there. You know, I saw that book and I thought, wow, these look really great. And then I saw some of those later photos, in particular the wedding cake photos, and they look just cheesy. Is there a difference? And here's why I'm asking the question in this context. Sure. There are so many of these UFO cases that appear promising in the beginning, and then things happen to them. Mm-hmm. Other people start putting out rival information. It's almost like they're infiltrated. And I know Billy Meier's had a lot of people live with him over the years. Is it possible that his little extended family there was infiltrated by people who did not wish him well and wanted to muddy the waters?
Yes, but the way they did it, from my understanding, was by taking some of his photos and or negatives and either altering them themselves or doing it in conjunction or collusion with other parties, perhaps such as Kalkorff and others. But you raise this very legitimate question about the wedding cake ship. So if I can just let everybody who's listening out there who's on the Internet know, I just remembered I've got the article on the front page about the wedding cake ship. It's on the right-hand column down. Well, I'll tell you exactly where. So if you want to go along with me, I'll walk it through a little. Now, you may not have that available to you, George, but I'll just comment on it in a way, hopefully, that people can follow along, and then they can eventually visit. It's called the Billy Meier Hoax Exposed, Part 1, The Wedding Cake Controversy. If you go to that page on the website, you can see, of course, my subtle little dig at my friend Jeff for not letting me. See, he tried to make a wedding cake ship. He had a cake pan and some, like, 6 or so little ornaments or something. I don't know exactly what he used, and it didn't come out real good. So he didn't want me to use that, but we are using all of Meier's photographs here from the wedding cake ship. And one of the things that you'll notice, whether you can see this right now or not, is as you look at the various day and nighttime photos, there's an enormous amount of detail in the manufacture. There's something like 100 jewel-like lights around one rim. There's a couple dozen silvery globes altogether on 3 different tiers and other machining. Now, the reason I bring it up descriptively like this, since you're raising a legitimate question, there must be people in your audience who are machinists or who work with metals in some form or another, or craftspeople who would look at this and might want to be able to take a crack at making such an object, and even either themselves or having somebody else photograph it to see what would it take to make something of this presence. And on the you'll also find, this is the article in which I also took some photographs of a friend of mine holding a box almost in the exact same spot that Meier had taken his photos at, and then the box is on the ground, trying to get a sense of how big would something have to be to occlude, the house in the way that it does when the object is sitting on the ground. And it's pretty weird. This is, sitting on the ground in front of his house at the time. I also have that video clip I was talking about, so don't think I'm just trying to pitch my film. You can look at the video clip of this wedding cake craft for yourself. And this is where people, get a chance to make up their minds for themselves. But I will take exception with only one thing you said. And when you talk about other cases, I personally am unaware of any case in existence where you have any, controversial or not, where you've got photos like this where somebody's got an object in their sights and they're standing 10 feet or 15 feet away from it taking pictures, or it's hovering over their head.
No, what I meant was other cases, for example, Roswell, where all this, you have an interesting series of events and you have eyewitnesses, and then all of a sudden all kinds of rival versions of it come out, almost as if it's, counterintuitive. Somebody's putting out this other information to muddy the waters.
Well, Roswell has to be the government's delight. Why do I say it? Simply because there's nothing left. You can't do anything with Roswell. It's like having your foot nailed to the floor and you walk around in a circle. So everybody can speak about Roswell till the cows come home and you don't have one piece of anything left. And yet the Meier case, which goes on to this day, let's remember there's 5 other photographers in this case. There's 120 witnesses, not just the woman from the UN, and people in other countries who've seen and photographed the ships and send these photos into Meier. I just saw this thing here. So this has been going on for decades, and it's still going on. He still meets with these people, yet people want to talk about the Texas lights and Roswell, and I go nuts.
Let's, you got the metal sample, you got the sound recording.
Yes.
As if we may come back to those. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about the big picture stuff. What is it that these aliens want with these visitors? What do they want us to know?
This is my understanding of it, and again, I don't speak for them and for Meier in a sense that I am the authority. I'm authorized to represent the material as I understand it is true to the way I receive it or get it, and I try to do it as clean a job as I can. Here's my take on it. And I'll include part of their story. According to them, in the distant, distant past, their forefathers, as well as other beings, were the gods of our antiquity. They were the gods of our religions and of our holy books. They manipulated early humans, primitively arising humans on this planet, and they led them to believe that they were the creator, they were the Lord, they were God, they were Jehovah, whatever, or they were the gods of the Bhagavad Gita or the Mahabharata, or gods of the Sumerians. There were extraterrestrials who were these beings, and that is their foundation on that part of the story. So why now? What's going on? Well, they claim they have a self-obligated mission to try to assist us to help ourselves out of the hole that we have dug with the initial help of these extraterrestrials who misrepresented themselves to us as the creator of all things. And if they were now to directly, once again, intervene and show up in person with a world not with a couple 100 million people at most, but with 7.5 billion, the calculated risk to the sanity and safety and security of the people in this world, the kind of tumult and horrific social problems that would arise, suicides and attacks amongst people, murders, attacks against them, chaos, destabilization, would not be in anybody's best interest and would set us back farther than it could possibly set us forward. So when people say, well, why don't they come and help us with this, or cure our illnesses, or show up, or prove their existence? Because they know our psyches. Look, I look at Meier's photos and films, and I think some other people do too, and we go, wow, that's pretty impressive. You read the whole thing, and you go, well, it's pretty hard to really drive a credible wedge in here. There's just too much. I'm partial to that. What about the rest of the world that knows nothing about UFOs, and they see something coming down out of the sky? Demons, the devil, we're being invaded, it's ETs, it's aliens, it's reptilians, whatever all this stuff is. So the tricky part of this is that we have to find the puzzle pieces and actually put the picture together ourselves, only with some vague ideas of what it leads to. But in truth, it isn't a vague picture. They're very firm about why they're doing this and what they would like us to get out of it. But we have to do that work. They can't give it all to us. They can't do it for us.
You say that they are here to assist us. Is that in part related to some of the prophecies that Meier has written down? Tell me about that part. Is there bad stuff coming? Is that what they're telling you?
Well, let's define it a little bit. In terms of, and we go through this in the film about prophecies and predictions. Prophecies are said to be the likely